everybody. Welcome back to Zoo School Live. My name is Laura, and today we are going to be meeting with a fine feathered friend and a good animal that fits with our spooky season. We're going to be talking about owls today. So before we have our friend come out and meet you guys in person, I wanted to kind of go over a couple special adaptations that we find with owls, and I have some really cool stuff to show you up close first. So, like other birds, owls are going to be covered in feathers, and those feathers are specially designed to help owls to fly super, super silently. So I have a couple examples we can look at up here. So first we have this nice tan and brown colored one. That's from a great horned owl. So if you guys have been out to the zoo, you may have seen Barbie, our great horned owl, on exhibit, or perhaps you've met Stella, one of our ambassador owls. Great horned owls are one of the largest species of owl found here in North America, and they're often called tigers of the sky because of this beautiful pattern. Now I also have a nice snowy owl feather for us to look at. As the name suggests, they are going to have a coloration to help them hide in the snowy habitat of the Arctic tundra. And for those of you Zoo School Live frequent fans, you've probably seen Snowy on there. Now the really cool thing I want to point out is that with owl feathers, if we look at the edge, and the best place to kind of look is right at the top there, you can kind of see that fringe. So it kind of breaks up at the edge there, and that helps to push the air out of the way without causing a whole lot of noise. We can actually compare that to an eagle feather. So if you look at the eagle and the owl feathers next to each other, you'll notice that the owl feathers have that tiny little fringe, whereas the eagle feather is pretty slick on the edge. It's pretty sharp on the edge. It doesn't really have that. So when an owl flaps its wings, it hardly makes a sound, whereas most other birds, when they're flapping around, you can definitely hear them moving and pushing that air. So that's a special adaptation to help them hunt, because owls are going to be predators. Their other two main adaptations that we're going to take a look at on our live animal are going to be that sharp hooked beak. So this is an owl skull replica. You can see that nice sharp hooked beak and those really large eyes, which are going to help them to see in low light. And then they're also going to have super sharp claws. So this is actually the replica of an eagle talon, or an eagle foot with those talons. But because owls are in the same group of birds called the birds of prey, they're going to have those sharp hooked talons too. So we're going to see those all on our live owl, but she's going to be a little bit on the smaller side. So when we talk about owls, most people initially, they do think of the great horned owl. So this is our big owl species living around here. It's very often used in imagery on TV and in movies and for commercials and stuff. So great horned owls are very well known and very easy to identify. And they're also one of the largest and most common we have around here. We also have around here in Pennsylvania the barred owl, which is the second largest. And if you guys tune in next week to Zoo School, you might actually get to learn a little bit more about them. And then the third most common and kind of most easily recognized is the barn owl. So if you guys tuned into Zoo School, I believe last week, we met Banshee, the barn owl. So this owl we're going to meet today is even smaller than this. So it's smaller than the great horned, the barred, and the barn owl. It's actually one of the smallest owl species we have here in Pennsylvania. So I'm going to bring our friend Houdini out so you guys can take a nice close look. I'll move our owls to the front here too. And all of our cool bio facts while she comes out to say hi. So like our other animals we've met here on Zoo School, Houdini is an ambassador animal. So she helps us to teach educational programming. And normally her job would include going out into the zoo, going out to schools and different events. And she has a pretty special story as to how she came to be at the zoo. So we're going to have Hoo-Hoo hang out right about there in our nice little tree space. So hopefully you can kind of see how she has great colors to help her hide. So this is Houdini. And Houdini is an eastern screech owl. And as the name implies, they do often screech, but they actually make a few other sounds. In fact, this time of year, we're getting into a really good time to listen for owls. This time of year, many of our owl species here in Pennsylvania are going to be looking for a mate. So they're going to be a little bit more talkative than normal. So this type of owl usually is pretty quiet. Much of that has to do with the fact that she is very small, and other owl species would hunt for her. So screech owls, despite their name, they don't often screech and they don't often make a ton of noise because they don't want to alert predators to where they live. But if you live near an area that has some forest and you head outside this time of year around dusk, you might actually hear the eastern screech owl. They make two different sounds this time of year that are pretty easy to identify. One is called the whinny, and it sounds a little bit like a horse whinnying. They go, woo, woo. Now Houdini's probably going to judge me on my owl calling today. So the whinny call, and then they also make a trill, which sounds a little bit more like a bug or something you might hear in the summertime, like a woo. So those are the two sounds that they're often going to make right around this time of year to communicate with one another to try to find a mate and then eventually build a nest. Now the eastern screech owl will not get any bigger than this. So you can see my hand compared to the rest of her body size. She's pretty petite. And females are in general bigger than the males in this species. So if you guys tuned into Zoo School and you met with Zeppelin way back when we first started doing Zoo School Live, Zeppelin's a lot smaller than Houdini. She weighs around 140 grams, which is a little bit more than an apple would weigh. And you can see she's got her nice little wings tucked, but they do have about a 1 foot wingspan. So if she were to flap those wings out, they would be about a 1 foot across. Now in the wild, they're going to be silent hunters just like other owls. Believe it or not, this tiny little owl is going to go out there and try to catch food, try to catch other animals. Things like bugs and frogs and snakes and small mice. They've even been known to eat birds that are about the same size as themselves. So they could eat small songbirds. They could even eat something as large as a dove, which is pretty impressive. And again, just like other owls, she does have a sharp hooked beak, and that's going to be her tool for ripping and tearing apart her food. She does have tiny little talons on her feet, which is why even though she's quite small, I have to wear a protective glove. And again, like other birds of prey, she's going to use those talons to help her to grab her food. So that's her main tool for hunting successfully. Now, like other owls, they do have large eyes. You can see her eyes take up a pretty decent amount of her face. If you were to take away all of those feathers, she would basically just be a tiny skull with really big eyes. If you were to have owl eyes at home, comparatively, your eyes would each be the size of a softball or a large orange. That's a whole lot of eyeball. But it's what they use to move around successfully in low lighting. Houdini can't carry a flashlight around at nighttime if she's looking for food. So instead, she needs to have her eyes be nice and big and wide so that she can let in as much natural light as possible. And this allows her to navigate in the dark much better than we would. Now, Houdini also has an excellent sense of hearing, but these little tufts, I'm going to try to gently point them out, these little tufts on top, those are not her ears. Her ears are actually tucked behind the feathers on the side of her head, and they're just little holes. They don't have external ears like we do. Instead, these tufts are what we call plumicorns. Sorry, hoo-hoo. And they can help her in a couple different ways. They might help her to camouflage. So if she's sitting very still like she is right now in the forest, you can see those colors would help her blend in. But those little tufts on top would also make it look like little branches were sticking out and things like that. So they help her to camouflage. They also are going to help her to communicate with other owls. So just like your eyebrows move up and down and shift around depending on what your facial expression is, owls can move their plumicorns. So they can sit up, they can sit down, they can flatten them, they can make them very straight. Right now, hoo-hoos are kind of off to the side a little bit. She's definitely a little unsure about the camera. This is her first debut on live, but otherwise she's pretty relaxed. If she was feeling very nervous, she would stick those plumicorns straight up and she would make her body as skinny as possible to look just like a tree. So that's one of their defining characteristics, is those two little tufts on top, but those are not actually her ears. Now, Houdini came here to the zoo for a couple reasons. One major one being that she unfortunately would probably have some trouble surviving in the wild. We believe that Houdini suffered from some kind of collision. So we're not sure if she ran into something herself or if she was hit by something, but she did suffer some trauma and damage to her eyes. If you look close enough at them, if she looks straight on at the camera, you might notice that the pupils dilate differently. So one pupil is oftentimes a little bit larger than the other. And so we're not sure how well she can see, and that can be a problem for an owl, especially for an owl because they hunt for their food using some of that eyesight. So she was taken to what's called a wildlife rehab, and after she was looked over and they figured out that she was otherwise healthy, but unfortunately probably couldn't see very well, they decided to place her with us. Now, why would we want a screech owl here? Well, she helps us to teach. There are a lot of screech owls and other owls that live in our area and share our habitat, and it's important that we do everything we can to try to make sure we coexist safely. I mentioned Houdini ran into something or something ran into her. Most likely it was a window or a car collision. Unfortunately, birds just don't understand windows. They don't quite get what's going on. They see through them, they see the reflection, and they think, oh, I can just go right over there. And this causes millions of birds every year to unfortunately die. Houdini was lucky, you know, she did suffer some damage, but she's otherwise healthy and she now has a permanent home where we take really good care of her. But her main job here is to help prevent what happened to her from happening to any other owls. So if you're a fan of owls, if you think they're beautiful, or even if you just love seeing them this time of year in spooky October around Halloween, there are a couple different things you can do to protect them. The one big thing is by blocking off your windows for birds. Now that doesn't mean you have to cover them up completely. You can get really special decals, really neat stickers that go on your windows. They can be in patterns, they can be in shapes. They help to distinguish that as glass for the birds so they realize that they can't go through it. The other big thing that you can do to help protect them is when you're doing any kind of pest control, if you have mice friends in your house that you're trying to get rid of, or rats or bugs, use things that are not going to cause damage to other animals. Things like sticky traps are super deadly for even a small bird like an owl. And rodenticides, things that are used as poison to kill owls, if eaten by a tiny little owl like Houdini, could kill them. In fact, if you guys tuned in to Zeppelin, one of our very first Zoo School episodes, you might remember that his name is Led Zeppelin because he ate something he wasn't supposed to and unfortunately suffered some damage from it. So try to make sure if you are using different pest control methods that it's going to be safe for the other wildlife in your area. And of course, be careful when you're out and about driving around, and try not to throw any litter or waste out your car window, because sometimes even that apple core that we think is just going to get eaten or disintegrate might attract a small animal, and that small animal eventually attracts a bigger one. So those are 3 really easy things you guys can do at home to help prevent other owls like Houdini from getting hurt. And thankfully we do have her with us, and she'll help to continue to spread our message and help people to learn about owls as long as she is here. We believe Houdini is at least 8 years old. We don't know exactly how old she is because she did come to us when she was already a full-grown owl, and it can be really hard to tell unless you get them when they're really young. But she is full size. So remember, screech owls are gonna be pretty small. Even though she's tiny though, she is a full-grown owl. All right, guys, I'm gonna check in. Remember, just like other zoo schools, if you guys have any questions, now is your chance, if you haven't already, to pop those in the comments, and I will do my best to answer them and see what more information we can talk about with our friend Houdini. I'm gonna see if she wants to get a little bit closer. She's doing a really good job so that you guys can see those little feathers around her eyes and her face. While I'm checking in for questions, just put those in the comments. Oh, Veronica said, one of my favorite zoos. My family visited twice. That's awesome. Thanks so much for coming out to Elmwood Park Zoo, Veronica. We hope to see you again. Let's see, any other questions here, guys? Kelsey says her daughter is saying hoo-hoo. That's right. So they don't necessarily make a hooting sound, but they do make lots of noise. As quiet as Houdini is right now, believe it or not, screech owls are extremely loud when they make noise at nighttime. We love when you guys drop in your comments and questions. Michelle says her son is saying hi. I hope you guys are doing great. All right, Chris Rose wants to know, where did she come from? So Houdini, I don't know the exact location. She came from a wildlife rehabilitation center nearby. So I don't know her exact habitat before she was injured, unfortunately, but she's been here at the zoo for quite a few years. And again, she came to us because she had a collision with a window or a car. We're not exactly sure, but thankfully she did recover enough to survive. She's just not able to be released. All right, Christina has asked from Joseph, almost 5, how do owls get into trees to eat bugs? That's a great question, Joseph. So thankfully, owls are excellent flyers. I'm gonna see if our friend Hoo will show off her wings just a little bit. Sometimes I can get her to kind of put them out a little. Can you show those wings? Yeah, very briefly, for just a second. So owls are excellent flyers, including little owls like Houdini. So in the wild, she would probably be sitting in a tree, watching, waiting very quietly. And then if she heard a bug somewhere, she would either be able to use her eyes to see it, to track it down, or she might even use her ears to keep listening and to pinpoint it. And then what she would do is once she figured out where that owl or that bug is, she would pounce on it very quickly and use those sharp claws on her feet to grab a hold of it. So owls are excellent flyers. They can fly right up into that tree and they can grab those bugs very quickly. Good question. Oh, Janet would like to know, why don't the burrowing owls run into the glass at Trail of Jag? That's an excellent question. So if you are a frequent visitor to the zoo, you may have met our burrowing owls up in the Trail of the Jaguar exhibit. They don't have anything on the glass there, but when we do bring in a new owl, so we brought in, I believe, Dorothy more recently, the female of the two, we did have tape on the glass. So we did establish some tape for a period of time so that the owls could get used to where that glass was and realize that that was a barrier. Now, the other big part of them not flying into that glass is that they probably see you guys on the other side, and even though the burrowing owls are comfortable living in their little home, they don't necessarily want to hang out with us. Great question, though. All right, so Kelly would like to know, what sound does she make? So in the wild, Hoo would make a couple different sounds. The most common ones will be the trill, which sounds like, and then the whinny call, which sounds like, woo! So kind of like a horse. They do not really hoot. And they do, of course, screech. Screeching is reserved more for when they are a little upset with other owls or other things. It's a defensive call that they'll do. Okay, guys. It looks like all the questions we have from right now. So if you guys think of anything else, please drop it in the comments. We will hop back on later to answer them. And I hope you guys enjoyed meeting with Houdini. She is really a cool bird and helps us to do, again, a lot of great education to protect her species in the wild. Make sure you guys tune in on Tuesday. Next week, we're going to be learning about some more spooky animals and their myths and legends that go along with them. So don't miss out on that. Again, Tuesday, we'll be live again at 11. And make sure you get out here to the zoo, guys. We're celebrating Halloween with Halloween nights with trick-or-treating tomorrow, and then do at the zoo Saturday and Sunday. All right, guys, have a good one.